So in the previous session, we talked about multi-stage builds, right? So today we'll understand about cache management with cache storage backends. Okay. So which means if you're building Docker images, right? Docker will generate some build cache, right? So by default, that cache gets stored in the local storage. Okay. So in this video, we'll see how to store that in AWS S3 buckets. Okay, so what is cache basically? So when this gets generated, so if you have instructions in the Docker file that do not change, right? So if you rebuild that same Docker file again and again, what will happen? So Docker will try to use the layer cache, right, guys?
Yes.
So by default, it gets stored in the local machine. Okay. So Docker, basically uses this build cache. So when I talk about Docker, it is a build kit daemon, which is responsible for building the Docker images. So it uses the internal cache to speed up the builds. So additionally, you can also export this build cache to the external storages like S3, or you can use concepts like GitHub Actions cache, okay, to speed up the builds. Okay, so why we should go for storing the cache in the external storages? Okay, so in case of CI/CD pipelines, so what we usually do, we usually build our CI/CD pipelines in agents, right? Correct. So agents can be, they can be permanent agents, or they can be temporary agents, also known as cloud agents. So temporary agents means these are the permanent machines, like EC2 instances, always connected to the, let's say your Jenkins master. Okay. So these EC2 instances are permanently connected to the master. So whenever we, run our pipelines or job, they get executed in these permanent VMs. Okay. Since these VMs are permanent, cache also gets stored here. So whenever you rerun the pipeline, the cache gets reused. Okay. So this is fine. But when you go for temporary or cloud agents, so like containers or, pods as build agents, so where your actual Jenkins jobs runs inside these containers. Okay. And the other thing with these cloud agencies, they are temporary. So which means once the job or pipeline is completed, so the container gets destroyed. Correct. Yes. Okay. So which means whatever cache that you have, okay, inside the container, it gets destroyed. So which means if you run the Docker file again, so this will be, executed inside a fresh container. So this container will not have any cache. So which means the entire Docker file has to be built from beginning. Clear?
Yes, Vikram.
Yes.
Okay. So in this case, it will increase your build time. So if you can upload the cache to some remote locations. Okay. So we have a lot of them. Okay. So we can use that remote cache to speed up the builds in our CI/CD pipelines. Okay. So that is the main use of this cache backend. Otherwise, whatever cache backend that we have, that is local cache, that is sufficient. Okay. So BuildX supports a lot of cache storage backends. Okay. So you have local, so which means, the cache gets stored in the local machine where you run your Docker file. Okay. So you have inline cache. So basically the cache will be embedded into another Docker image, and then it gets pushed into the same location where you have your main container image. Okay. Right. You have GHA, so which is GitHub Actions cache. So GitHub Actions cache is a separate feature in GitHub. Okay. So this is nothing related to any, uploading or downloading from a remote storage. So it is related to GitHub Actions. Okay. So whenever you have different jobs in GitHub Actions, you can share the data between those jobs using two concepts in GitHub Actions or GitLab CI. Okay. So if you have worked on, uh, either of these, you might have come across uh, these two terms like artifacts and cache. Okay. So these two are used to share the data across the jobs. So you can use the concept of GitHub cache, to speed up the builds. You can also upload to S3 buckets. You can also upload to AZ blob storage, Azure blob storage. Okay. So we will see how to store, our cache in the S3 buckets. And also remember, this is an experimental feature. Okay. So the interfaces, the commands that you use, okay, may change in the future and it can be unstable as well. Got it? So this S3 cache backend not only uploads your, cache to AWS S3, it is also, it also supports S3 like services like Minio, okay, or Minio. So this also supports S3 like storage like object storage. Okay. You can also in fact set up your own Minio internally and then use it to store the cache. Got it? And by default, whatever Docker driver that we have, right? So when we install Docker desktop, we know that it gets installed with a default Docker driver. That is the build kit embedded into Docker daemon itself. So that driver doesn't support this S3 cache backend. So you need to use a different driver called Docker container. Okay. So which means you need to create another builder using Docker buildx, create another builder. Okay, so hyphen driver, that is Docker container, and hyphen name, any other builder you need to create. Then only S3, cache backend works. Okay, and this is the command. Of course, I will also show you from the documentation. Okay, so you need to use Docker buildx build, hyphen push, the name of the image, and then cache to and cache from. So where you want to upload the cache to. So it is S3. This is the reason. This is the bucket name and the name of the cache. Okay. This is just for your identification. So this is the bucket name and this is the name of the cache. Similarly, from where you have to download the cache. It's the same configuration. S3 reason, the name of the bucket and the name of the cache. Okay. You can also see once your build is completed, you have your cache pushed to the S3 buckets. Clear, guys? Any questions?
For every building, we need to use the next time cache from, or again we need to use cache to as well. For
Yes.
next.
Just to check the previous cache and to push the cache that is generated in this step.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'll do is first, and one more thing. Yeah, so let me show from the. Okay, you can go to this link. Okay. So this is using S3 cache. But in order to authenticate with your AWS S3, right? So you have a couple of options. Either you can pass the access key and secret access key of the IAM user, directly in the Docker build command. Yes. Otherwise, you can use AWS configure to configure those credentials locally. Okay. Then you can use this Docker build command. Okay. So first, let's create quickly an IAM user. So I'll search for the IAM service in AWS. So you can give that IAM user only the permissions to access the S3, or else you can use it for, for complete admin purposes. It's up to you. Okay. So let me create a user. I already have, other users. So let me create a user known as, let's say, a Docker. So I don't require AWS management access for this user. Let's click on next. Add user to the group, attach policies directly. Okay, so I'll attach policy directly and I'll give him this administrator access. Okay, and I'll click on next, create user. Okay, so once this user is created, you can just click on that user. The name of the user is Docker. Go to the security credentials. So currently we don't have any MFA activated, and then we don't have any access keys. Click on create an access key. So I need access key for the command line. Just select the command line, confirm, click on next. No need of any tag. So this is the access key and secret access key. And one more thing, what we need to do is we need to install AWS CLI. Okay. So in order to install AWS CLI, so you can use any package manager. And if you're using any, AMI Linux, it gets pre-installed with AWS CLI. So you don't have to install it. So you can come to this installation, go to Windows, and then you can download this MSI file. So the installation is pretty straightforward. You don't have to do anything, just download and install it. No special requirements for this. Okay. So once you have this AWS CLI installed, what you can do is you can click on AWS configure. Okay. So it will ask you first for the access key. Okay, so let me just copy the access key from here. Okay, press enter. Then it will ask for the secret key. Just copy it. Okay, default reason, I'm not setting any default reason. And default output format, if you want, you can set it as JSON. Okay, so now my AWS CLI is configured. I can list all the S3 buckets using AWS S3 LS. So I don't want to go through all the commands and all. Okay. So if you see the output of AWS S3 LS, I don't have any S3 bucket. I'll go to the S3 service and create a bucket. So bucket name should be unique globally. So I'll say Docker S3 cache backend, something like this. And your bucket should be public. Okay, I'm unchecking this public access, acknowledge, enable versioning. That's it, create a bucket. So I'm not going for any security related configuration, so that you need to take care of, right? Like who can access these S3 buckets and all. So I have the S3 bucket. If you look at the contents, currently I don't have anything. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll try to build and then push my cache to S3 bucket. Okay, so let me open the notepad. Okay, so Docker build hyphen push. So the name of the image I wanted to use is my username slash some name. Okay, and tag cache to S3. Reason is so the default reason is US East 1 and name of the bucket. So what is your name of the bucket? This is the name of the bucket. Okay, just replace the name of the bucket. Name of the cache, I'm just saying it as uh, Docker underscore cache. Okay, the same thing cache from is also the same configuration, so I'm just copy pasting. Okay, that's it. Okay, so let's take any folder like you can take what do you say, any Docker file. Okay, it can be anything. Okay, I just have to have the Docker file. That's it. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll just copy this command. So docker buildx build, and then it will build from the the current context, and then it will tag with this name and push it. And at the same time, cache will also be maintained in the S3 bucket. Okay.
Vikram, we are using default drive.
Yeah. So I wanted to show that error message first. Okay. You can see here it says it says the default driver is not supported. That is the Docker driver. Okay. So we need to create. So Docker buildx create. The name of the driver is let's say container, because it is Docker container. And the driver type, if you don't use, it will by default use Docker container driver only. Okay. So no need to what do you say, use it. Okay. And here, so we have used this, we have created this Docker container driver, but that is not set as default. So you can use Docker buildx use to set the this container to be default. Otherwise, what I can do is I can pass the name of the builder, right? So the name of the builder is container. Got it? Okay, so you can see it is trying to first create that builder container. Okay, so if you have access to Docker desktop, okay, and if you go to the settings, builders, okay, so this is the builder. Okay, so the Docker container driver, the name of the builder is also the container. It is trying to build the image. Okay, you can see importing cache from S3. I think it is taking a lot of time. Okay, so now you can see exporting to image, exporting layer. So this is like creating your local image. Okay. Okay, so pushing layers. So this is Docker push. I think you can also see it in the builds. Okay, it is not yet recorded. I think it is here. So build in progress. You can see logs from here also.
The push,
Exporting layers.
the push we mentioned is for Docker Hub pushing, right? Not for
Yes.
S3.
No, no. So now here, if you see, it is exporting to S3 after the push is completed. Okay. Now I can just come here, refresh. You can see the blobs. That is the actual data. And then this is manifest. Okay, I'll talk about manifest in some time. Got it, guys? So this is about using, remote cache management with AWS S3. Okay. So let me first clean up the resources. Let me, okay, I need to first empty the bucket. And then delete the bucket. I'll also delete the IAM user that I created. Okay. Okay, so the resources are cleaned up.